Thank you guys for being so patient. We had a very popular day and we just got into the room here, and we wanted to make sure that everyone gets this info because there's no one I don't know that doesn't use some device sometimes. And some people use computers all day long or phones all day long. When we're using technology, it can start to affect our bodies in a very negative way. They said that forward posture or forward head posture is an epidemic. That poor posture is really epidemic, that we don't spend the time and the energy to try to take care of our bodies in the way that we should, and we're not really checking our posture. And if our posture is in an abnormal and poor position, it affects everything in our body. So if you're going to be in a position where you're using phones and computers over time, we want to make sure you're setting yourself up to win to some degree, okay? So you can look in the pictures. Number one is just when we go to sit down, so if we're talking about how to set your workstation up for success, one of the most important things, number one, is if you are going to be seated, which we suggest in a workstation, if you're working in front of a computer, doing anything for any length of time, is kind of like a 2 or 3 to 1, meaning 2 or 3 times more standing than sitting. Sitting is very detrimental to our bodies. Sitting is the new smoking, really. So when your body is in a seated position, it is more compressed and distressed. The discs of your spine have more pressure on the inside of them than when you're standing. So when you stand, you actually offload your spine slightly. When you sit, you actually compress it even more. The first thing that you always will ask yourself is, number one, how long am I sitting? There's a study that was done with white-collar workers, and they compared a marathon runner, but he also sat for 6 hours a day, to a laborer, maybe a mechanic, or someone who was on his feet all day, but wasn't, a marathon runner, probably went to the bar and had a cigarette at the end of the day. The person who had a longer life expectancy was the mechanic. And what they found out is that the stagnant part of sitting, it doesn't allow good circulation, that our bodies were built to move and flow through motion. We don't have to be marathon runners, but we do need to keep our bodies moving. So the point with the study was, number one, is that a little bit of movement all day is much healthier than a lot of movement at one time. If you are seated and you have inability to stand, the number two thing is to make sure that you're taking posture breaks like every hour. Well, that means that at the very minimum, we want you to, at least if you've been sitting in a computer all day, we want you to at least sit up straight, open your chest, and extend your head. Probably take 5 to 10 deep breaths and even close your eyes if possible. That is a posture break. You could do that standing too, same idea. But that position, that external, we call that extension. It's extension of the head, extension of the torso, and extension of the back. And we call this external rotation of the arms, meaning your palms are up. That changes and rewires the chemistry in your brain. It absolutely does. Your brain, in this kind of more poor seated posture or this flexed posture, is going to actually increase cortisol in your body, stress hormones. It's going to put your body in more of a fight or flight position. And if you think about it, when you have someone who's depressed, a lot of times they're going to be more hunched and more slouched. That creates depression, and then the depression creates the posture. It's kind of a bitter cycle. That's even how some things are diagnosed in psychology as your posture. But your chemistry is changed by your posture. That's the point. So if we can change it for the worse, we can change it for the better. And if you breathe and improve your posture, your body has a serotonin increase at that point. Everything we do can start to bump the needle in a position of making our bodies more dysfunctional or diseased, or more in ease and balance. And if you're seated in a posture all day, think about that posture. When you go to sit down in a chair, most of us may just kind of plop down on the front of it, not have our back touching the back. And then once we start to forget about how we're sitting, it's very easy for us to slouch back. And so if I go and sit on the edge of the chair, I'm kind of going to immediately slouch forward. This is what we call flexor dominant posture. I'm already in a position where I'm not even using the seat as it was designed. So if sitting's not good, sitting in the wrong way in the wrong chair is really bad. It's like a triple whammy. So when you go to sit down in any chair at any time in any place of your life, you should start to train yourself to focus on the bullseye right at the back of the chair. Where the chair meets the seat, and that's right where you want to aim your buttocks, and you want to aim your buttocks right back into that. So I'm at least trying to maintain the curve of my back and keep my head from coming forward. The curves of your body and your neck and your back that are kind of C-shaped here, and they are shock absorbers to gravity. They're like springs. When you sit and you don't hold good posture, kind of like her, if I put my hips forward and I lean back, those curves are taken away. So the mechanical resistance to gravity is very much altered. Gravity becomes a significant stress in that position. And that's where disc problems and arthritis slowly build up because we're not putting the right amount of pressure on our body, and our body has to adapt to abnormal stressors. Seated, not as good as standing. Seated in a bad position, twice as bad. The longer you do it, the more risk you're at. Okay, those are the big things. Just sitting, period, versus standing. If you are going to be standing, it's highly recommended that you have a little block or something at your feet where you can put your toes up on the block so you can kind of stretch your calf and change, bend your knee on one side and relax, bend your knee on another side, basically so you're stretching your calf on there, because if you're just standing without adjusting your position, your body likely isn't in perfect position and will start to have some challenges. So give yourself some grace. Sit, we'll call it 15 minutes on every hour, and you could stand for 45. But every hour, trying to do that posture break to reset your brain and your body. How do you know you're in good posture when you're seated or standing? Well, when you're seated, your ear should be over your shoulder, okay? It doesn't mean you have to force it back or do some weird things. It's just staying tall, being tall. Like there's a string attached to my top of my head, and when I bring it tall, my head comes right in alignment with my shoulder. My shoulder would be right in alignment with my hip. And if I was standing, my hip would be right in alignment with my ankle. If I had a line like at my ankle, it would go right up the hem of my pants. It'd go through my hip. So that hem doesn't, most people's hems, they go forward of their ankle and then they come back to the hip. So a lot of times most people's hips, when we stand, they kind of come forward this way. So their hem comes kind of at an angle like they're skiing, and then their body comes back to just kind of keep them from falling over, then their head comes back forward. That's bad posture. Good posture is hips underneath, right above the ankle. So again, my hem is straight through my hip. It goes straight through my shoulder, straight through my ear. Perfect. Being aware of that is huge. If you're going to be using a device, any device, phone or computer, it's definitely recommended that what you're using is number one, at eye level, as best as it can be. So, how many people hold their phone like this? Almost no one. If you did, I guarantee you wouldn't use your phone as long. I guarantee it. You'd just be tired of using it. Your shoulders would get tired. But it should be at eye level. The second thing with it is that not only the position, but it should be in front of you. I know that kind of makes sense, but if you're someone that works with multiple screens or have a lot of options at your desk, you have to do a lot of things, you may find that something you're using a lot is to the left or the right of you. And in that case, you might be twisted all day long looking at things. And you're kind of used to it because that's just where you are. But like if I'm using a keyboard here in my head, well, I'm in alignment, but really my whole hips are twisted the other way. So just remember that your most active things you're using should be right in front of you, right in front of you. If you answer the phone a lot, it probably shouldn't be off to the side. It should maybe be right in front of you. And have to figure out how do you get a keyboard under the desk or something so that you can manage more of these things, right? When people who do, sit for a living, I'll call it, or work a lot on a computer, if they come in and get an assessment by me, a lot of times I can tell you their chin is not in alignment with their torso. It's turned to one side, the side they look all the time. Because, if they're doing accounting, whatever it might be. And they'll say, well, that's where my computer is. A kind of side note is if you're using your phone and stuff, a lot of times you probably might be relaxing on a couch or in a chair. You're not really thinking it's for work purposes. We put ourselves in postures. I have a lot of people who sit on their legs. I'm just not flexible enough to do that. But you probably always sit on your legs in one way, which means that your spine is shifted and falling off another way. I mean, even if you're at a desk and you're that flexible, you might sit at your desk that way. Your body was not built to be in a position too long. Again, moving, taking breaks is huge. But realize when you're seated or standing, you should have your spine straight from the front and have these good curves from the side. That's kind of the take home. So computer, phone use, what you use more should be in front of you. If you're looking at a screen long enough, for sure, you want that at eye level, which means your monitor would have to be fairly high. That makes sense. Or you can drop your seat quite low and you can somehow have a keyboard then that's accessible that's not like this. That's not good. So again, if I'm using my computer a lot, it should be in front of me, number one, but we don't want it so high that my shoulders are kind of like this up to my ears while I'm using it. And it shouldn't be so low that I'm slouching down to use it either, right? Ultimately, keyboard in a perfect situation would mean my shoulders are just relaxed. They're in a good place. My elbow's bent at 90 degrees and my wrist is maybe flexed up at, 15 degrees at the most, or 20, but it pretty much straight across. And then I can use a keyboard right here, which would mean that for most people, if their desk is here for whatever reason, then you need something that can get a mouse pulled out so that it's closer to you. Or mouse, keyboard and mouse, but keyboard for sure should be pulled out so that you can be relaxed here. Okay. If your keyboard's up a little higher and you're straining this way, you're going to start to strain your elbows, wrists, and your shoulders. Okay. The mouse would be the same idea. The mouse should be right in place with all that, just maybe over a little bit. I can't tell you how many people I've talked to or workstations I've seen where maybe a keyboard's there, but the mouse is somehow like on a shelf, 2 feet away, and you're up here using it all day. You don't think about it because it's not like you're necessarily getting tired, but you do it enough times, you're using muscles you shouldn't have to. It should be really close. Probably the ideal would be an active workstation. Some sort of a workstation that you could sit at and then somehow can convert, actively kind of raise a monitor, raise a keyboard that you could stand would be the ideal. Okay, that way you can kind of do both. They do, on Amazon, I think I bought a rising desk, standing desk. It's a sitting and standing, you press a button, it will go to a certain height. It might have been $100. It wasn't very big, it wasn't, but it does move up and down pretty easily. So those things don't have to be that expensive to use. So you can look any more people are using those things. When it comes to chairs, ideally the chair that you're in would have a good lumbar support, meaning a nice curve there. It would also probably come up as high as you can so that your head gets feedback when it's like way forward because you're not touching the seat. Ideally it'd be a curve for your neck and a curve for your back, so you kind of know I'm in the right spot. I'm being held properly. Remember these discs, we like these, so if you don't have this fancy chair, but you have at least a firmer chair that you could put this on and sit on it, that would be great to kind of help get, we saw it get fit while you sit. Just moving a little bit while you sit, it keeps you from being stagnant. And then we also, a lot of times, will use this blue thing right behind us as a back support. Keeps you from slouching. So, you would probably want almost like a woodenish chair if you had something like this. You might not want something real squishy or fancy. So, that's just something to remember that this is a huge tool. And if you're, like I talked about standing, if you put this on the ground, you can kind of stretch your calf on it. Just put your foot up on it, just your ball of your foot, just to stretch your calf out. If you're really feeling, brave that day, you could balance on it for a second while you're standing there. You're trying not to fall. But a lot of uses for this. All right, let's just see if stretching and flexibility is huge. I just did a stretching workshop in November, and I went through pretty much, I would say, a whole body stretch in a fairly short amount of time. So if you do sit, there's a couple muscles that get tight more often than others. The hip flexors, right in the front here of your hips, they get shorter when you sit. So if your hip flexor attaches to your leg here and into your spine, well, when I stand, they're lengthened. When I sit, they get closer. So the longer I sit, the more tight they get. And if I don't stretch them, then that's what either pulls my hips forward or pulls my body forward. And you see people starting to walk more like this because those hip flexors are so tight. So getting those stretched out is just a nice little lunging stretch, which I know you guys can't really see there. But it just this lunging stretch, which we show on those, is huge. The hip flexors will get short, and the pecs, they get short. Most people have tight, kind of tighter, but maybe even weak hip flexors and chest muscles, but those tensions are pulling you forward. But even if you're sitting at your chair, you can just do here, you could do this kind of thing. I like this called, I think it's a burger stretch, but you basically try to touch your thumbs like a T-Rex stretch for your pecs. That's great sitting there, but those are the two areas you're going to get really tight for people, maybe the front of the neck. Ultimately, when you sit a lot, your back, your glutes, they're weak. They're not doing anything. They're not holding you upright. They're not really resisting gravity. They just get weak. So you need to strengthen your glutes back up probably. You need to strengthen your rhomboids, which is kind of even just like if I was to lean forward just a little bit and pulse my arms back, that would do it. Or you could lay on the ground fully, but just trying to kind of get strength in my middle back, or rows, when people are doing exercises like those. But you'd have like a band or resistance. Strengthening the middle back, loosening up the chest. Strengthen up the glutes, like just doing little glute kickbacks or something if people are kind of doing their kickbacks like that or things like that. Glutes strong stronger and stretching out that front. Those are your two like take-home top things to do if you sit for a long time. And most of us are dominant in the front, so we could probably all stand to do back exercises more than even front ones. So if you're trying to get back into it, I recommend looking online for what they call posterior chain exercises. Posterior chain, that's the back of your body. So my final thought is, this thing is kind of wrapping up, is consistency is the key here. You know, your work and everything else is going to try to take our attention away from our posture. We're going to get sucked into things without thinking about where we are. It's why you come get adjusted, because life isn't perfect, and we want your brain and body to unconsciously be able to hold better position, all right? We want to hold better position. So it will do it unconsciously, but you do need to be conscious of it still. So consistently making reminders, having alarms, doing things that have you break your patterns will help you get back into state with your body. When you get into your work and just into something, you might be in some weird position. If people, hey, have a buddy or somebody at home, take a picture of each other when you see bad posture, and I think it'll remind you to stop doing it, all right? I think you'll easily see these things, but it's just reminding to stay consistent. Yeah, have a good night. Bye-bye.